Hello, in this video we are going to talk about what is the difference between the user stories and tasks. In my other video we have already discussed what is the difference between the product backlog and sprint backlog. So here we are going to deep dive into what exactly is the task and how it is different from the user story. And in the grooming session, to what extent we should break down the requirements into smaller requirements. So we are going to discuss all that by taking an example. Before we get started, my name is Anita Myana. I'm from Certifiera Consulting Services. I do conduct different certification specific trainings like PMP, CAPM, Agile Certified Practitioner, Agile Scrum Master and different other certification specific trainings. I also conduct trainings for business analysis, different levels of business analysis. I do also conduct trainings for different technologies like Oracle, SQL, PLSQL and more technologies from the IT industry. So that was about myself. Now let us get started with the session. So as we know, we need to, so as to develop a product, maybe some software product or any of the website or any kind of application that we want to develop, we need to understand different features that we need to build in the product. For example, in the shopping portal, which we can see, that is grocery shopping portal, we need to understand what all different functions we want to have in the final product. So those functions are known as product requirements. For example, search for the items is a function or a functionality. Selecting the items, adding the items to the cart or shopping cart and purchasing the items. So these are the different functionalities or product requirements which we want to have in the final product or deliverable. So in Agile terminology, we call the requirements document a product backlog. So product backlog will consist of different list of product requirements which could be in the form of epic, features or user stories. So now what is epic? So let us understand the term epic. In this product backlog, which consists of different list of product requirements, search for the items, it could be an epic. Epic means a requirement which is not clear, which is vague, which is large and which can be broken down into smaller requirements so as to make it easy for the team to estimate, understand and develop the requirement. And so as to make it small enough to be accommodated as part of a sprint depending on the length of the sprint of the project. So epic is a large body of work or a large requirement which can be further broken down into smaller requirements like features or user stories. Now feature could be a requirement which can be further broken down into smaller requirements called user stories. So user story is the smallest requirement on the product backlog, which is estimatable, which is clear, which is understandable, and the team is able to develop that particular user story as part of a particular sprint, and it is also small enough to be accommodated as part of a sprint. So we are going to decompose the epics into features and features into user stories, and sometimes user stories into even smaller user stories in the grooming session. So we need to regularly or frequently conduct the product backlog grooming session in the project life cycle. So in the grooming session, we will try to prioritize the requirements, that is, we will try to move the high priority requirements to the top of the list, and we try to decompose the larger requirements into smaller ones, and we also try to estimate the requirements and we try to assign some size to the requirements. But here in this video we are trying to focus more on what is the difference between the user story and the task. So I have not covered in detail how to estimate the requirements and what exactly should be the format that you should follow for defining the user stories. So as to understand what is the format that you need to follow for defining the user story, please watch my other video, that is what is user story. And to understand the estimation techniques, please try to watch my different video on the estimation techniques. So now let us continue with this concept of user stories and tasks. So here in this product backlog, we can see search for items is an epic, which is broken down into smaller user stories, like search the items by entering some text, or search the items by selecting based on the category, or search by filtering based on past purchases. So these are some of the example user stories that I have written. So which are easy to understand for the team, which are estimatable and which are testable and which are small enough to be developed as part of a sprint. So we have decomposed these epics into user stories. These are also some of the requirements on the product backlog, but if they are understandable, estimatable, if the team is able to develop them, then they don't have to decompose those requirements into smaller requirements. But here we can see there is a requirement, purchase the items. Purchase the items can be further broken down into smaller requirements like check out the items, specify the address and make the payment. Making the payment also can be further broken down into smaller requirements or user stories. So here making the payment is broken down into smaller user stories like choose the payment method, confirm the amount, confirm the payment, maybe authorize the payment. So there could be different possible smaller user stories under this particular feature. So here in this product backlog, we have decomposed epics into features and features into user stories. Now it is time to plan a sprint. When the team plans a sprint, they will try to first understand whether the product backlog is completely groomed, whether we have moved the high priority items to the top of the list, and whether we have broken down the epics into features and features into user stories, and whether these user stories are estimated and whether we have assigned some size to the user stories. So in this sprint planning meeting, the team is going to select some high priority requirements from the product backlog and they will move those items to the sprint backlog. So the sprint backlog is an artifact which is specific to a particular sprint. So in a project, we will have only one product backlog with list of all the requirements which we need to develop in the final product. And sprint backlog will be specific to a particular sprint. So here in this sprint, we are going to develop these three user stories. So the sprint backlog for this sprint will consist of these three user stories, and it will also consist of the tasks that we need to perform. So now let us understand how do we decompose these user stories into tasks. So as to develop these user stories, search the items by entering some text. So this particular user story, for developing this particular user story, the developers might have to perform around 10 to 15 different tasks. For example, one of the tasks could be design the UI or user interface for the search functionality. Second task could be creating the backend database tables. Third task could be establish the relationship between the tables. Next task could be insert some test data. Some other task could be perform the coding, perform the code review, perform the unit testing, make the test setup for the performance testing. So there could be different possible development tasks that the developers need to carry out as part of this sprint. So on the sprint backlog, we will have the user stories and we will also create the list of tasks that the team has to perform in the sprint. So for completing these three user stories, the team might have to perform around 50 to 60 different tasks. So we are not going to have the list of tasks on the product backlog. Product backlog can only have list of requirements, that is epics, features or user stories. And only in the sprint planning meeting we are going to decompose the user stories into tasks, and the team is going to work on these tasks in the sprint, and they will try to complete these all tasks which they are planning for the sprint. And when they complete these 50 to 60 tasks, that means they will be able to finish these 3 functionalities or user stories. So the primary difference between the user story and task is the user story will talk about a functionality or a specific feature or a function of the product, and task is the activity that the team is going to perform as part of a sprint. So this is the main difference between the user stories and tasks. So this is all about how do we decompose the user stories into tasks in the sprint planning meeting. Thank you very much for listening to my video. For more such knowledgeable videos and for more such sessions, please stay connected. Thank you.